Right now, as we speak, men who declare that they are women have been permitted into federal prisons, and they are now being removed and placed into male prisons. Female prisoners are put at risk every day when there are men. They have to, be in cells with them. They have to shower with them. That is an extreme violation of safety and privacy. I think that throughout my life, and certainly for the last 20 years or so, I was the first gymnast to stand up and speak about the abuse in the sport. And I just kind of came to the decision at this point in my life that the most important thing to me is to stand up for what I care about, which is children and free speech. We don't know who the next president is. That can just get reversed. So it needs to be legislated federally and at the state level. And I think what will impact that is cultural change. I think if the 70% of Americans that agree with us stand up and say, this is unacceptable, the laws start to change. Mark Zuckerberg has said,
when I was watching your interviews, because I ended up watching more interviews since, we got disconnected yesterday, and you never really went into too much extent as to why. Like, obviously, I know the reason why you left Levi's, but the the decision making behind it. And I wanted to ask you, was you leaving Levi's more so you saw the opportunity of starting XXXY Athletics over here, or was it you saw the risk of staying at Levi's, compromising, your values, your principles? Which one of the two was it?
yeah, I hadn't had the idea yet to start XXXY Athletics, but I wanted to sort of leave without getting into the background of kind of what happened internally, which I wrote plenty about and not really talking a ton about now, just because I've moved on. But I started to feel that staying in established corporate America would not allow me to basically speak my mind. And so it was just time to move on. And over the course of the next year, I found and decided that I would be better off starting my own thing and working for myself and being able to say what I think.
What what was the biggest lesson that you learned from that? Was it the importance of standing up for what you believe? Was it, it's better to fail at what you love than succeed at what you hate? Like, what was really the main lesson you took away from that?
Well, I think that throughout my life, and certainly for the last 20 years or so, I was the first gymnast to stand up and uh, speak about the abuse in the sport.
Mhm.
And I just kind of came to the decision at this point in my life that the most important thing to me is to stand up for what I care about, which is children and free speech. And people ask me all the time, why was this during COVID the thing that you were kind of willing to die on a hill for? And I just think to myself and often say to them, if you're not willing to stand up for free speech and children, do you even have a hill that you're willing to die on? And I certainly do. And um, I just felt that I wanted to move on and be able to say what I really care about. And corporate America was not open to that. I, I, within corporate America, you really need to kind of toe the party line. And I have always said what I think, and it just became kind of untenable at a certain point. And as I moved on and I started to interview, because I did start to interview at established corporate companies over the course of the following year, it quickly became clear that I would not be able to re-enter. I had already proven myself to be fairly disobedient and kind of say what I think regardless of of what I was told. And as I interviewed at very large established corporate companies for jobs I was qualified for, I was repeatedly told I would need to apologize for my actions, meaning, having stood up for children and open public schools, all the while, private schools were open. So wealthy kids were permitted to kind of re-enter their lives, and kids who attend public schools, which my children attend public schools, um, that was considered unacceptable, despite the fact that, over the course of 22, 23, it became established and known that public schools had stayed closed for far too long. It still was unacceptable that I had said what I said. And, I wasn't willing to apologize for what I'd done because I was right. And even if I wasn't right, free speech is um, a, a right in America. And, granted, the federal government, which is what the First Amendment protects us from, censorship from the federal government, had not kind of interfered with that right. I believe in a culture of free speech. And I believe just because we take a job in corporate America, that doesn't mean we give up our right to free speech. And I really think we need to get back to a culture of free speech where a wide range of views are acceptable. We need open debate and dissent to get to the right answers. And I wanted to be part of that. These issues matter too much to me, the protection of children and the protection of free speech. So I felt like, despite my age, because, I could be heading to retirement age, but I am 55. I felt like it was important, and I would start over and I would figure out how to forge my own path, which is what I've done. So it wasn't really until a year after I decided to leave and resign from Levi's that I came up with the idea to start this brand through conversations with a friend who now works for the company. He's our creative director. We came up with this idea that there are so many people that feel left out by the ideologies furthered by corporate America. And there's so many people like me, like us, that aren't sort of on board with far left ideology. And there's the opportunity and for a brand that stands up for truth and stands up for women and girls to succeed. There's an opportunity for a brand like mine. Most Americans agree that women's sports should be protected. And so when I looked at all the athletic brands in the marketplace, and certainly my background as an athlete contributed, but when I looked around, there's no brand, not Nike, the biggest player in sports, not Adidas, not Lululemon, none of the big brands were taking a stand on the protection of women's sports. And I think there is no bigger issue right now impacting women's sports than males entering. With every male that enters women's sports, women's rights are taken away. So I just felt like who better than me to start a brand like this. And I think people have leaned in and they're really supporting us. We're not even a year old. We're 10 months old today. And we've had tremendous impact and success so far. So I figured, heck, I'll give it a try. Maybe I'll fail, but I'll fail on my own terms.
I what I told you earlier, and I have it written up. I have daily affirmations in my shower, my car, any place where I'm there a lot. And one of the things is that I rather fail at something I love than succeed at something I hate. And I've been living at that because I think you see it a lot. And I wanted to go down the corporate route, but actually I have a question now, and you'll see where I'm going with this. But about yesterday when we got cut off on the interview about Trump, his inauguration speech, he mentioned that, hey, look, there's only two genders now in America, male, female. Now you mentioned that, yes, well, that is a big step. It still may not have so much effect in the private institutions that are still allowing these, trans athletes to play in women's sports and so on and so on. What did you think about that? I mean, I know we spoke about it a little bit, but obviously,
yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, look, an executive order impacts federal law and rules.
Yeah.
And, if I take it outside of sports for just a second, declaring that there are two sexes, which is just a basic matter of truth. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous that we need an executive order to declare this. It's a biological truth. It's just reality. But here we are. We needed an executive order because I think the left has pushed this so far as to be ridiculous. So within federally funded institutions, that is now the law of the land because of this executive order. So if we look at prisons, for instance, where this is also an issue, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily care about female inmates, it's a very niche population, but if you only a small percentage of prisons are federal prisons, 122 prisons are federal. So right now, as we speak, men who declare that they are women have been permitted into federal prisons, and they are now being removed and placed into male prisons. Female prisoners are put at risk every day when there are men. They have to be in cells with them. They have to shower with them. That is an extreme violation of safety and privacy. But there are over 1,500 state prisons. So significantly more state prisons than there are federal. This executive order does not affect those state prisons. And 14 states have rules on the books and laws on the books that if you say you're a woman, you are. Those men don't have to leave. In California right now, those men are staying within those state prisons and impacting the safety of female inmates. So the same is true for sports. And the vast majority of sports, people don't realize this, take place outside of the governance of Title IX. Title IX is governed federally, though Title IX dictates that institutions that receive federal funding, so public schools, public universities, any sports happening within that venue are governed by Title IX and are now protected. But I was an elite gymnast as a child. I competed for over 15 years. I never once competed in a competition governed by Title IX. It was governed by the U.S. Olympic Committee and the individual sports within that, in my case, USA Gymnastics. The law on the books, or the rule on the books right now for USA Gymnastics, is trans-identified men are allowed to compete in women's gymnastics except at the very highest level.
Like that's a current rule right now. That's a current rule.
Yes, it's on their website right now. Just go look up USA Gymnastics rules around trans-identified athletes, although they say, transgender athletes. So if you compete at the level 9 level, that's the levels in gymnastics, level, I think 4 through 9, it's very possible that a male can compete in women's gymnastics, except at the very highest level where they're vying for sort of Olympic team spots. So my point is, this is not solved in any way, shape, or form. I think 70% of sports, youth sports and adult sports, exist outside of Title IX's governance. You have individual races, for instance, like the Boston Marathon. That is independently governed by a board that is influenced by corporate interests who sponsor it. Right now, there is a man who has been qualified for the April Boston Marathon in the women's category. He gets to do that still. The Boston Marathon, unless they change the rules, that's not changing. So, and there's a million races like that. It's not just the Boston Marathon. I use that as an example. Another example, there's a private high school in San Francisco called the Waldorf School. They're fielding a male player on the women's basketball team. He has scored half the points of the team for this entire season, despite missing games. That isn't changing. California is going to double down. I think if we watch the news right now, the left is not backing down on this. California is not backing down. They're going to continue fighting. So, my point is, Trump got this started, and I think has started to kind of provide the permission structure for people to stand up and push back on this. But we have to finish what he started. We, the people, have to finish what he started, and we need to stand up and change the cultural conversation. We also need this legislated, because at the end of the day, an executive order can change with the next president. We don't know who the next president is. That can just get reversed. So it needs to be legislated federally and at the state level. And I think what will impact that is cultural change. I think if the 70% of Americans that agree with us stand up and say, this is unacceptable, the laws start to change. But most people are still silent on the matter. They're afraid of being called bigots and transphobes, and they accept that framing of the argument. And so my goal in starting this brand was to change the culture.
Yeah. Do you think that that's the solution? Is it just a mass cultural change? And how do you get to a position where, like you said, when you were in corporate, you were scared to speak up about these things, or you weren't allowed to speak up against these things, because then, you'd risk losing your job. And then you made the decision, then you couldn't go back, because every single interview they asked you to apologize. So it's kind of like, once you make that decision to speak up publicly against things that are, if you speak out against it, you're demonized. It's a very hard decision. So,
it is.
How do you see that happening? A culture
Yeah.
change?
Well, I mean, I guess I would argue, first of all, I wasn't afraid. I was aware that there were potential consequences. But for me, the overriding factor was for me, COVID was really a line in the sand, and I saw children being harmed within the public school system. And so I just started. I often don't think things through before I start, which I think is a blessing and a curse. And so I wasn't afraid. I was in a position as a longtime corporate executive where if it didn't go particularly well for me, I would be okay. Look, I was a corporate executive. I made good money for a long time. I had a nest egg. I could handle the consequences. I didn't think that the backlash would be so swift within the culture. I didn't think that citizens of San Francisco would come after me, which they did. I mean, people were publishing my address online. That's a threat, right? That's a threat to say, this is where this person lives. You should go find her and you should let her know what you think. People were, calling the hotline to say that I was a bigot. I mean, this was very common during COVID, that if you pushed back on lockdowns, et cetera, you were considered a bigot and a murderer. And that certainly happened to me. I had people chasing me down the street in San Francisco. I'd go out for walks every day, which is about the only thing we were allowed to do. And they would recognize me because of my social media posts and come after me and scream at me that I was a murderer. But I kept going because I just felt like these people have gone mad. Like, it's so clear to me what's happening here. And we just need to get back to a culture where free speech is valued. We needed to have open and honest conversations about these policies that were implemented during COVID, and we weren't permitted to. Look, Mark Zuckerberg has said very clearly at this point on Joe Rogan, I think last week, that they were pressured and screamed at to take down social media posts. Yeah. I will tell you, I started a group called Open Schools San Francisco in early 2020. And we attempted to hold rallies to demonstrate that there was public support for opening schools. Those posts to kind of market the rallies and get people to show up, literally as soon as I posted them, they were taken down by Facebook. So, what Mark Zuckerberg is saying now, which I think is a little too late.
I was going to say, I don't know much about that, because it seems like he's just picking sides every 4 years because he's scared. That's to get swept up.
I agree with I agree with you, but it is also evidence, I believe, of what we knew all along, which is that they were, silencing everyday citizens, and they were being pressured by the federal government to do so. He's admitted and acknowledged that, and that was certainly my experience. I mean, my own husband was kicked off Twitter for a year for stating an opinion, which is the COVID vaccine has unintended consequences and there are side effects. Zuckerberg has said, now that was on X, which was not governed by Zuckerberg, but he was kicked off for a year until Elon took over for saying something factual. There are side effects. Every medication has side effects. And an opinion, he stated that didn't seem particularly safe. That should absolutely be protected by the federal government. We know from the Twitter files that Twitter CEO at the time, which was Jack Dorsey, was again very, very much pressured by the federal government to remove anything that sort of flew in the face of the government's desire to get as many people vaccinated as possible. So this is deeply problematic, but I think people are waking up to the fact, and I think the leaders of these companies are, whether they're kowtowing to Trump to garner favor with this administration, or whether they've seen the error of their ways, I don't really care which it is. There's going to be less censorship on social media now. So I can't really imagine anything more important to fight for than free speech in this country. We cannot find truth. We cannot live up to American values if we aren't exercising that right. There is no democracy without free speech. And so, whether it's COVID or whether it's the issue of gender ideology, I think we all need to find our courage and speak up. And it's a little bit safer now. So I think more people will.
Yeah, I would agree that culture has a huge influence, because when you think about it, I mean, I remember I was in high school when COVID happened, and I remember the now looking back, right, not knowing at the time, but you look through the protocols, you look at when I went to a private school, like if you took off your mask for just like to breathe anything, like you were,
or drink water,
you got a detention, you got something. And now when I look back and I'm like, hold up. maybe that was a little bit weird. But, you know, now you kind of see, okay, that culture has a big influence on what people do because if Zuckerberg at a highest level, the guy's a billionaire, he runs a, I would argue a majority of the world, the social media
Yeah,
is the way that we communicate. He
yeah,
runs that and he was pressured. Imagine somebody that, you know,
exactly. Just a regular
an everyday
person.
person that I can't imagine, it's the same pressure. And I know it to a little extent, but I definitely think culture is allowing for more open conversation, more open debate. I
I
think that's
agree with
what's
that.
needed.
No,
And
I completely agree. I completely agree with that. And you raise a really good point, and this is why I have a little patience, with Zuckerberg saying these things after the fact. Is like, you're one of the most powerful people in the world. You are one of the richest people in the
Mhm.
world, and you didn't have the balls, pardon my French, to stand up and say no when the government pressured you to take things down. You just went along. I mean, it's pathetic. Like, if anybody had the power to do so
Probably
and the
him.
leeway to do so, it should be him. And if people
Mhm.
like me, who were well off, but certainly not of his caliber, and certainly not in a position to never have a job again. I mean, that's not me. I'm the breadwinner in my family. I have 4 children. I'm paying for college. I'm paying for everything. If I had the courage to do it, why didn't he? Elon had the courage to do it. Why didn't he? And so I'm very skeptical of his sort of, epiphanies at this
Yeah,
point, but I accept them. I welcome, because I do think we also have to welcome people to the fight, and we have to um, welcome people that perhaps were wrong in the past but have seen the error of their ways. Otherwise, we lose. If
yeah,
we're total purists about, well, you didn't stand up in the beginning, we're screwed. Like, we need all the people
yeah. No,
that
for sure.
now. So
Yeah,
I, like I said, I welcome it. I'm a little bit mistrustful, and I wish what he'd said was, I'm sorry. If he said, I'm sorry, I screwed up, I was weak in the face of this
yeah. I don't think
pressure.
he would ever. I don't think he would ever. I mean,
No,
hopefully,
he won't.
but I don't
He
think he.
won't, and he didn't. But that would really give me more confidence that he understood and had done some introspection about what he had done. Right now, it feels like currying favor with the administration. But let's see what he does.
We'll see.
Let's see if he
Time,
holds.
time tells. So
Yeah,
we'll definitely see
time
what.
tells. But it's often said, I don't know who said it, that legislation and politics are downstream from culture, which I really believe. Um, if we have sacrificed the culture, the people speaking common sense, I'm not even going to say people on the right, but the people who believe in sort of basic facts, if we cede the culture to ideologues on the left, we lose before we start, because it's like everybody's on board already. Everybody's on board with pronouns. Everybody's on board with trans women are women. So then when legislation gets to the legislature, either at the state or the federal level, it gets passed. And you have, 70-80% of Americans who are like, this is crazy, who went along. They participated in that. And so I just feel like we have to wrest the culture back with the full force that it was taken from us. And all I'm asking for is common sense and open debate and dissent to rule the day, so that we don't have these ridiculous laws that say, hey, self ID is fine. If you say you're a woman, you are. You don't need hormones. You don't need surgery. Not that that makes you a woman. So if you say you are, you can come into women's prisons. I think there's 1,500 males who say they're women who are in women's prisons right now. Most of them have done. They look like men. Like, they don't haven't even done
No, I don't.
anything.
I can't even think about that. That sounds like a. That literally sounds like a movie. Like I don't
It's
know.
like insane. Like, how do we live here? How do we live in a place where you need an executive order to say there are two sexes? It's like needing an executive order to say cats aren't dogs and the sky is blue. But here we are. We need it, and I think it's a huge first step. And what I tell people is, Trump got us started. Now we need to. He's passed the baton to us, and we need to stand up and get some strength of
Yes.
character.
And I think, and this is, I want to emphasize for anybody that is watching, because it came to my head. I don't know if you've ever seen this video. It was a very powerful video because it just showed you the power of, all you need is one person, because it was
Yeah.
a guy on a hill and he started
Yeah,
dancing.
I've seen it.
You
Yeah,
saw
I
it and
love
he
that.
started
Yeah,
dancing
I've
crazy.
seen it.
And then the second guy came and
Yeah.
then, and then
The
it just started to swarm. And it's you. And what I took away from it, right? I was like, it wasn't that one guy, it was a second guy. Because the second guy was okay with thinking he was crazy. Because the first guy, he was comfortable in his skin because he was the crazy one, but he knew he was
Yeah,
crazy. But it was
that's
the
right.
second guy. And
That's right.
what's happening now is you don't need everybody in culture, everybody in society to start posting. You just need a couple people. You need,
It's true. I have seen that video.
Yeah.
And I think what it points to is, look, there are very few people who are willing to be that first person. There are very few people crazy enough and willing to make the sacrifice. And that's not unique to this time period. That's always. I mean, think about Nazi Germany. Not that I know we're not supposed to compare it to that, but there were very few people who took the risk to say, to hide people in their homes, to facilitate the safety of a Jewish. There were very few people because you're risking everything. You're risking your life at that point. But if that gives permission to a second person, suddenly the floodgates are kind of breaking. And then there's a third, and then it really opens up. And the video shows that, right? So I think, my assessment is there's maybe 10% of people who are kind of willing to stand up and do the right thing no matter what. Most people would rather stand with the crowd than do the right thing. But if you build a crowd, those people
they'll want to join the crowd. And that's how it is. And I know like we spoke, your time is limited. I want to end off on this because I want to see how you're going to respond to this. I believe, okay, that you are that one person in the fashion industry. I will say this, or athletics. Clothing? Do you say clothing, fashion? What's a
clothing, apparel, fashion?
Okay,
all of
clothing,
it.
apparel.
All works.
Yes, I will say you are that one person. I would like to see over the span of the next 10 years, 5 years, of who the people are gonna, start their own brand based off of truth, based off of hey, listen, you believe in this? Okay, I believe in this. Now come with me. And now it's belief merit and not so much, what you see with Nike and what you see with Lululemon, that they have these, I can't even get into it because there's so many different things, but you see it's driving away people like us that don't want to support that because, hey, I got to support. I don't want to support you because this is what you're supporting.
Right.
You're standing up for this. Like, I don't want to support you. But I want to ask you, do you think you alone standing up for truth, you alone standing up for freedom of speech is going to put you as a competitor to like Lululemon and Nike? Or is that even your goal, or what's?
It's certainly the goal. I mean, I'm in this I don't want to be a niche player. I want to be a big player. Most Americans agree with us. Like, why shouldn't I have the opportunity to really grow and thrive? We're the vast majority. We represent the majority. So here's what I would just leave you with is within corporate America, what CEOs care about and C-suite people is making money for the company. That's their fiduciary responsibility.
Yeah.
That is. So their positions and stances they've taken, these very left-leaning, out of touch with Americans positions, whether it's around sex or whether it's around DEI, all those things, they saw those as money-making strategies.
Okay.
They didn't care.
So that was the move. It was just a money-making.
They didn't think that consciously, but certainly they thought that was a marketable strategy that would draw a lot of consumers.
Which did the reversal, I think, because when you look at companies like, was it Bud Light or Budweiser? I forgot which.
Exactly, it's Bud Light. Yeah, exactly.
Completely
and I think Bud Light is the line in the sand to say, wait a minute, you guys went too far. Like, Bud Light is an all-American brand for all-American dudes who like watching sports and going to barbecues and drinking beer, and you're pushing this ideology on us? Wait, no. And the boycott has dramatically impacted their business. They went from the number one share brand to number 3 and falling, and it's lasted. And so no other company wants to experience that. And so I think that was really kind of a moment in time that said, you know what, this is not a money-making strategy. This is out of touch with everyday Americans.
Oh, sure.
And I think a lot of brands have sort of backed away. You see a lot of big companies backing away from DEI, for instance. They've not yet assertively stated the opposite position, which is, we believe sex is real, we believe merit matters, like all of these things. And they haven't yet, but they have sort of retreated.
I think they're just backing away. They're backing away because of, I see Target. Target is my favorite one because I love shopping at Target. And every time I went there, there was rainbow flags and every single
and they're gone.
And now they're gone. And I think it's
Right,
just,
because
culture.
they experienced a similar decline in their business
Hmm.
in, I'm not sure what year it was, but it was maybe 2 years ago, with their Pride collection, and they really took it too far. They had tuck
Way too
friendly
far.
bathing suits, and people were
Yeah.
like, hell no, we're done with this.
Mm.
And they backed away. Now, part of backing away is CEOs have very big egos. They're not going to admit they were wrong, but they will retreat and they will start to kind of further positions and marketing strategies that are more unifying for people.
Okay.
But I still think there's an opportunity for brands like mine. People say all the time, but you're really political. You think we're not political. We're stating truth, which is biology exists. Men and women are different. Title IX matters. Women deserve safety, privacy, and fairness. That should not be political. That should just be a truth-based thing to say. And so I think there's an opportunity for brands who are willing to be brave enough to speak the truth and move the culture forward. But only time will tell. You know, we're 10 months old. The other thing is we got to make great product, because if people are drawn to the
Yeah.
brand's mission but they don't like the product, which they seem to, it's not going to last. So I've taken my 35 years of experience in knowing product and brand to
Yeah.
try to put the very best product into the market, and people love it. I mean, um, we'll see. Look, startups fail all the time. I'm not so arrogant to think that we're guaranteed success, but I think what we're saying is just common sense, and most people agree with us. So,
I
I think there is real opportunity for us.
I would say so. I would make the bet, and I'll say it now live on camera, and this is going to be posted away for forever on the internet. In the next 5 years, what will happen is that right now, I believe, maybe your first 3 months, 5 months, even up until now, it was a lot. Well, I believe in your mission, so I'm gonna help support you. And the
Right.
reverse is gonna happen where I love the
That's right.
product so much.
That's
Hey, I love the mission that you're saying. I love the message that
right.
you're saying. And I think the reversal is gonna be made. And I would love to see what happens because and I said it in the intro or off camera, but you're somebody that has a lot of experience. That you're not talking about
Yeah.
somebody that you were just cruising. You were
Right.
right below the seats. No, you were the
Right.
global brand president. Like you knew how this operates. And I think
Right.
now with the culture change, the next 4 years of what I would, and Trump said, the golden age of America, I think a lot is going to happen for your brand, and I'm very excited to
I
see
really appreciate that. And I think that's right. I mean, there are other brands, maybe not in my kind of category of apparel, but there are other brands that have started that sort of push back on all this crazy wokeness.
it.
A lot of times, the people, though, don't have the experience I have. They have a great idea, but they're kind of learning on the job how to make a soft drink or a search engine so I am unique in that regard, and that I come to this with over 30 years of experience. I know how to build a brand and make great products. So that should work in my favor. And my husband says to me every day, I think you're exactly right. Like, you've got to push the product. They're going to come to you for the mission, but they're going to stay for the product. And until you establish
Absolutely.
that,
Hmm.
and I do know that, but people are leaning in for the mission right now, and then they are finding they love the product and coming back. And we have really high rate of people that are buying second and third time, which says to me the product worked for them. That said, startups are hard. It's a hard business. It's a crowded category. So keeping my fingers crossed, and I hope people do really lean in, and I really hope young people like you are leaning in as well,
Yes.
because we need the young people to make the brand cool.
I would love to support. Like, if I'm gonna actually go online and I give you my word, I'm gonna order a couple. I wish. Do you have it? I'm assuming, but do you have any South Florida locations? Do you have any locations, or is everything online?
we have
Or not?
we're only 10 months old today, actually.
Yeah,
So we have no actual stores right now.
yeah.
Everything's online. But we're looking at that if in the future. Usually startup brands don't kind of start to open stores until a few years in. It's a big
Okay.
expense, but we don't right now. But I think you'll find that, one, we have free returns. So if you don't like it or it doesn't fit, you can
Mhm.
exchange it for another product.
Okay.
But yeah, we're looking at that both at wholesale locations as well as our own retail location. Right now, it's just online, though.
Well, that's another forecast that I'm gonna put. Hopefully, you guys bring in a South Florida location. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, Las Olas. I don't know if you've ever been in the Fort Lauderdale area. Very
I have.
popular. Yeah, I think you would be right perfect. Like right here, it would be absolutely perfect.
Well, it's interesting you say that because we've done some testing with like media and where we run ads, and when we run
Mhm.
them in Florida, we really see a bump. Like the people in Florida, the SEC stays, the SEC conference in general, when we run
Mhm.
ads there, we see a really big lift because these are people that are really open to the
Yeah,
message. So Florida would certainly be on the list of first locations if we do get to that.
I look forward to that. Again, thank you,
Yeah,
Jennifer, for taking the time. I hope this isn't
yeah.
our last one. I would love to do one. We're doing you. I'm not gonna say where you're at, but I believe we may be going there soon. But definitely, I would love to see, in the future, near future, if we can do something in person too.
Oh, that would be awesome. You can say where I am. I live in Colorado.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I did.
yeah.
I didn't know for
That's fine.
for
That's
security
fine.
reasons.
People know I say it all the time. Yeah, I live in Colorado. We left California in 2021. People ask me all the time, "Well, why did you choose Colorado? That's a blue state too." But I really like it here. Colorado has kind of a libertarian streak, and so despite the fact that it is very blue, it does have a real live and let live attitude. And um, my neighbors don't all agree with me, but they all still like me, and that does not happen in
That's
California.
what matters. That's what matters. And we're gonna leave off on that because I think that's the most important thing, and that's the reason why I do
That's
this.
right.
I try to interview people from both sides, so whether you're on the left, whether you're on the right,
Yeah,
whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim. Like I want to
right.
interview you because it's important,
Smart.
and I think this is what's going to keep the culture and creating a culture of, hey, you may disagree with me, but we're still cool people. Like, we can still talk. We don't have not
Yeah.
everything is about politics or, we can still be friends. And I think so much of that division was exemplified the last 2 years. And I saw it with this election cycle with my
Yeah.
cousin. Like, I'm not gonna go down the rabbit hole, but just too much. And it was like, I don't think that's what America was
It's
founded on or what it
it's
should be.
the opposite of America. I mean, America was founded on freedom of speech, freedom
Yeah.
of religion. I don't know what happened. I would argue you're quite young, but that it started in 2015 with Trump's first run for president. We just became so divided, and the left decided he was so evil and beyond the pale that you had to reject anyone you knew that might consider voting for him. Now, obviously, he's won in a pretty decisive fashion. And I think a lot of people are waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe I actually have friends that voted for him, people I like, and I need to reconsider my priors. So, and I think people like Elon, and who's a former lefty, and people who have come out, Joe Rogan, to say, to support Trump, and we're now seeing athletes and celebrities. I mean, we had Snoop Dogg at one of the inaugural events. Um, it gives permission to people who have been quiet for
Yeah.
fear of retribution to come out and say. I think people have a real responsibility to speak up and say when they disagree with the mainstream narrative, because that normalizes the fact that we don't all agree on everything all the time.
I very much appreciate your time because I know you're extremely busy, and I like that. And I think the key highlight of this interview and what I want people to take away is culture always wins. And if we can create a culture where, exactly what we were talking about, we
Yeah.
promote free speech, whatever side you're on. We promote, hey, listen, you don't have to be fearful of losing your job because, creating a culture of that, I think that's
Yes.
where the future looks bright. And I think that's where the future is heading. And I'm optimistic of that because the last four
I
years
am too.
weren't one that were very pretty. So I'm optimistic the next 4 years and continued, we cannot get back in this mess, that we have.
I couldn't agree with you more. And what I used to say to people in the last 4 years is you do have to be a little fearful because you will get demonized and you will be called terrible names. But you have to do it anyway
Yes.
because this is too important. This is who we are as people. But I think now you don't have to be as afraid. And so you got to just do it. Screw up your courage and stand up, because at the end of the day, American values, free speech, that matters more. It matters more than anything. I'm terrified that we might lose that, which is why I've stood up for the last 5 years to say, hey, wait a minute, and to kind of challenge certain orthodoxies. So I think people can be a little less afraid now. I think the culture is changing, and we really need people to join us.
Yes. Again, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope
Sure.
this isn't the last one, and I'll see
Awesome.
you guys on the next one.